16 minutes after 8 o'clock, and joining us in studio this morning from Builders Do It Center, Justin Ellis. Good morning.
Morning, Mike. How are you this morning?
Doing great. How about yourself?
You know what? I really can't complain.
Won't do any good, right? No one listens.
No, nobody listens when I complain. Nobody listens when I do a lot of things. So
It's pretty universal. I'm in the same boat. No one listens either. So
just try to avoid the complaining as a result.
That's right. So whenever you just ask, it's kind of like one of those things when you talk to someone, you're like, hey, how's it going? And all you're expecting is just pretty good or something. You get those few people that actually tell you how they're doing, and you're like, I was just being metaphorical.
I was being courteous. I didn't actually care. Yeah.
Kind of like that. Just remember the rule of thumb.
I don't know if you're familiar with the way this social norm works. But.
So just remember, for folks that maybe actually think that people are concerned on how you are, just remember it's just a courtesy. It's not legit. So anyway. It's a helpful tip. We're all about tips right now. This is a helpful tip.
Yeah, so here's some tips on dealing with society as a whole, apparently.
That's right.
In case you've been slightly socially awkward and need guidance from the two of us, which may be concerning in and of itself.
I mean, it's just a rule of thumb. I mean, when someone says, hey, how are you doing? And then all of a sudden you list off all your medical issues. They really don't want to know. Yeah. But anyway, so and for folks that may have not heard Justin join us on the show in previous times, Justin joins us a couple times each month from Builders Do It Center, and we always focus on projects at the home. For the most part, they go a little outside of that sometimes, but for the most part, so one time we may talk about interior paint, another time we may talk about tile and grouting and things like that. We've even talked about when jobs get too big to do it yourself, how to look for the proper contractors to do those jobs. You can find all of our previous episodes. Probably the quickest way to find it would look up the Builders Do It Center on YouTube and find that page there, and you'll see all of our previous ones. They're also available in our Roswell's Talk FM video, but you're going to have to do some digging and things like that. So, but they're there, and if you missed any of those topics, we've talked like sprinkler systems, painting, other wood type stuff, so you can go back and find them there. But today, I guess we're staying in the realm of wood.
We are.
Last time we were talking about refurbishing. How to refurbish like furniture and things like that, and some of the different ways you can treat that. Well, now we're kind of focusing on outdoor wood projects and how to make wood last when the weather doesn't. Because we got sun, wind, all that stuff's not good for wood overall if it's left unprotected.
Exactly. So yeah, with spring kind of starting to set in, I'm sure some folks are. That have an exterior deck or a fence or maybe a little bit of wood siding on their home have gone outside and are thinking, man, that's a little dingy looking, and want to think about how can I make that exterior wood look new,
sure.
And hopefully extend the life of it in the process. So we wanted to kind of take the opportunity and talk a little bit about how those refinishing projects can go, what you need to plan for, what products you want to consider, and then really how you execute that project and
sure.
get a beautiful looking finished product.
Well, there's a fine line because there is people that do desire things to have what they call a weathered look.
Absolutely.
But you want them to look weathered, not actually be weathered, because if they are actually weathered, then you've got strength issues and everything else.
Absolutely. And that weathered gray look is very popular. And this isn't necessarily, when you're talking exterior wood refinishing, you're not necessarily talking about having a different color,
right?
Or not having that gray look. I'm actually personally a big fan. I'm a big fan of cedar fences that have been allowed to gray naturally and kind of go where they're supposed to go. That's what that product's supposed to look like naturally. But you still really want to protect it and make sure you extend the life of that wood. And depending on the application, if you're talking about an exterior wood siding or a deck, you really have to make sure that you're protecting that wood from having any further damage down the road that might impair its ability to do its functional job,
sure.
other than being pretty. The deck's supposed to keep you off the ground, and the siding's supposed to keep water out of your house.
Sure.
And if you don't protect the wood can't protect the structure it's a part of.
Sure. Let me ask you this, because obviously we talk about protections. You hear about the stain, the varnishes, and things like that for stain and all that, and predominantly that's to protect you against water, wind, sun, that kind of thing. But when you're dealing with outdoor projects, there's another factor generally, and it's termites. Is there any products you use that in the same vein or realm of stain, varnish, and things that also offer some protection against that, or is that just a treating and getting the insect guys out doing stuff?
Really, when you're talking about exterior wood, it depends. Termites are not as big an issue with exterior wood because there's not a water source. So the issue with termites generally is not, in our area at least, we don't have a huge termite issue in southeast New Mexico, but you do hear about homes that have major termite problems.
Sure.
The reason is that you have a kind of a confluence of factors. So in order to have a termite infestation, you have to have water, because termites need a ton of water.
Okay.
And you have to have a place for them to reside, and they don't like sunlight. So that's why exterior wood tends not to be affected. One of the exceptions around here is you will see them on fences every once in a while. They'll actually form on fences, and I'll be the first to tell you I'm not a termite expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I know there's a couple of different species.
Well, I've seen, and I've growing up East Coast, different things. But when since I've lived out here, and I have seen this, and I've only seen it happen here, and it'll usually be in the spring, summertime time frame, and usually every time I've seen it, it's always been late in the day, like towards the evenings. It's all of a sudden like this infest of these flying termites just come through the area, and you see them flying. And first, if you don't know what they are, you're like, oh, that's kind of pretty. You see all this, and then they break the wings, and now they're basically paratrooping into your whole area. And then about a week later, you start seeing the mud walls up along your fence line and things like that. Yep. And I've never seen that till I moved out here.
Absolutely.
And I like I said, I don't think they're doing major damage as far as structurally, but at the end of the day, it kind of, you can tear up fences. Like you'll see them eating layers there. And
and fences are the best way to prevent that is either to use a kind of wood that has a natural resistance to insects.
Okay.
So cedar is always a go-to, and redwood is also the same way. Redwood and cedar have a tannin content. Tannins are a kind of chemical that's found in woods. It's also the same thing in wine that makes wine have that dry taste.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not a wine guy per se either, but that's the flavor that you get. That it's the difference between a red wine and a white wine.
Okay.
Red wines have a lot of tannins. Well, those same tannins are present in all woods, but they're in higher concentration in certain species like redwood and cedar and most hardwoods.
Okay.
And insects and a lot of other bad microbial things that we don't want on wood are naturally repelled by those. So that's why you want to choose things like redwood and cedar for exterior projects.
Gotcha.
Or you want to go to treated woods.
Okay.
Whether that's treated with an ACQ or an MCQ product.
So it's not
that's
just
a chemical that's going to do that. And that's really what prevents the growth of fungus or mold or the infestation of insects, whether that's termites or wood-boring ants or some other species. When we're really talking about refinishing in our area, the biggest thing we're having to protect from is the sun.
Right.
Water's a factor, but the reality is it doesn't rain here that much, but it's sunny like 392 days a year.
It's just like your car, they talk about the waxes to protect your car, and if you don't, you see paint fades and things like that. Same kind of thing happens to your wood.
Exactly. We don't need undercoating on cars here because we don't have a water or a salt issue, but we do have a sun issue from above. And so when you're dealing with wood refinishing in southeast New Mexico, you really want to think about this as putting sunscreen on that wood.
Okay.
And protecting it from that. Now, water shedding is definitely a factor, and so you want to consider that, but anything that's going to protect from the sun will cause it to shed enough water. Because the sun beats the snot out of wood, and it affects the surface, which will eventually cause deterioration, which will also allow water into it. A lot of water sealers, and there's a number of water sealers out there. Thompson's is a brand name that everybody knows.
Sure.
That product doesn't actually have a ton of UV resistance built in. And we actually don't recommend Thompson's Water Seal for wood. We sell Thompson's Water Seal. It's really good for masonry. If you're wanting to keep
a patio or something, stone.
Yeah, exactly.
Decks,
brick, block, stone, that sort of thing. It's actually fantastic for that, but it's really not a great finish for wood, especially wood that you're going to be touching. It has a tendency with certain kinds of wood to form a film on the surface.
Sure.
Thompson's does make a product called a wood sealer that's a little bit better, but we really still recommend that you look at other products.
Sure.
Especially for deck applications or fencing or siding. And really all of these projects are about preparation and then selecting the right product. So as far as prep goes, anytime you're working with wood and you're going to be applying a finish that's going to penetrate the surface, And what we're really talking about here is penetrating finishes. We're not talking about a paint that sits on the surface. We're talking about a stain of some sort.
It gets in the grain and gets in the pores.
Absolutely, and that's really critical to protecting that wood on the exterior of a home, especially for things like a deck. Siding you can paint. You can paint fences, although it's not very common.
Sure.
But decks, you really don't want to paint a deck because the foot traffic's going to wear it out.
Sure.
A stain, since it's integrated into the grain, is going to actually stay even though you're going to be walking on it. And so you're going to get a much longer service life out of that finish. So regardless of what you're doing, you want to make sure that that wood is prepared to take that finish in. And the first way you check to make sure is what you call the water splash test. So you take a little bit of water, you go out onto your deck or onto a piece of the siding or out to your fence, and you splash a little water on it. If it doesn't basically immediately soak in, if it beads up and comes off, you have one of a couple issues. Either the wood is too wet. If it's rained recently,
Just
that's
saturated.
probably why. If you've just built whatever the structure is and you've used cedar or green treated lumber, or for that matter, any kind of treated lumber, there's a water content to that product from the mill and from the treating plant, and so you have to allow that to dry out. Otherwise, whatever you put on it will just sit on the surface.
Gotcha. Which we were just talking about, because you can't get to the pores and things, and it'd be just like painting it, where eventually it's going to come right off.
Well, and in the case of a stain, since it's not intended to have any surface cohesion to it, it will just bead up and roll right off when you put it on, and you will have nothing but a mess in the
Gotcha.
process. I've seen it. It's ugly. It doesn't end
Well, I think
well.
stained is your skin, your pants,
Yeah.
things like that.
Oh, everything. It's bad. The other possibility is that there's an existing finish on there, and it's not allowing the water to get in. Now, if that finish is consistent everywhere, you may not need to refinish unless you just want to change the color.
Let it do its thing.
Exactly. What's more likely is that the finish is deteriorated. So if it soaks in places, but it beads up in other areas,
Sure.
then you probably need to consider prepping. You've got a few options. Pressure washing is always a great option, especially if you just have some light surface dust or dirt, or a little bit of finish that's sitting on the surface. A pressure washing may remove that.
Okay.
And I would recommend washing anything that you're going to do first. A day or two before. It just makes for a better project.
Sure.
You don't have dirt in the way. You're not getting crap on your rollers or having to spray over dirt. But if you do that, kind of going back to the fact that you don't want your wood saturated, you need to give that wood time to dry thoroughly. Now, if you're doing it on a sunny day in southeast New Mexico, it may be dry on the other side of the deck by the time you get to the other end.
Sure.
It absolutely may be. But you want to make sure that you go back and do that water splash test anytime you're about to apply it. And if it doesn't pass that and immediately soak up that water, you have a problem you need to address or to give it time to fix itself.
Sure.
So the other option, if you have something more significant built up, a paint or a semi-solid stain or a thick layer of finish, is sanding. And you may want to think about sanding that exterior wood surface. Power sanding is a great way to do that, something like an orbital sander. I would recommend not using anything like a belt sander unless you're trying to strip a very heavy layer of something off.
Okay.
But regardless, you want to start with a low grit number, and this is true of any sanding project or abrasive project. So, you want to start with an abrasive in the 80 grit, 100 grit
A little
area.
rougher sandpaper.
Absolutely, to remove anything that's large, and then work your way down through one or two stages to something in the 220 grit range.
Because basically, if you use the higher numbers, you're just making a whole lot more work for yourself.
Well, and really,
You start with that.
what you're doing is it's an aggressiveness thing.
Gotcha.
So an 80 grit sandpaper has larger pieces of abrasive on that paper, and a 220 grit paper has smaller ones. And basically, the sanding process or the abrasive process is that you're scraping it, you're scratching it, and so when you make big scrapes and big scratches with that 80 grit, you're removing lots of material, which is very efficient. So it's great for removing large chunks of stuff.
Gotcha.
But it also leaves the surface fairly rough. And as you go smaller, you're making smaller and smaller scrapes, and therefore getting a finer and finer
Smoother
finish.
finish. Gotcha.
So you want to make sure that you kind of work your way down, or actually up in number, but down in grit size.
Right.
And then once you've done that, if you do sand, you're going to want to go ahead and either wash or broom that surface off to make sure you get all that dust out of the way. And that you would, yet again, do that water splash test to make sure you got everything and that you're ready to go. Once you've done the prep, then you got to select a product. We've talked a little bit about some of the sealer type products like Thompson's. Really, ultimately, you have three options, and that is they're all finishes, but that's a solid finish, a semi-solid finish, or a transparent finish. And this may be a stain product. There are actually solid body stains that when they're applied, it's a solid color, but it soaks into the wood. These are going to provide the most protection, but they're also going to affect the color the most.
Sure.
You don't see solid stains on decks a lot, but you do see them very commonly on siding and occasionally on fences. It'll give you a solid brown or a solid gray or whatever that color you desire is. They're tintable, much like paint, and they're really a fantastic product if that's the look you want. But they're not going to allow any grain to come through. And so it's not really going to look like natural wood, so to speak. So if you do want more of that grain showing through, then you're going to want to move to a semi-solid finish, something that's going to allow most of that grain to come through, but still has a little bit more of an opaque quality, which is going to provide a little more protection from sun and cover the color more. So if you're trying to make a drastic color change, you want a bright red or a bright blue or something, aggressive, and bold, a solid or a semi-solid finish, whether that's a stain or some other product, is the way to go. The most traditional is a transparent finish, and that doesn't necessarily mean clear. It can still have a color to it, but it's going to allow all the grain and all the character of that wood to come through. And that would be a product like a deck stain. Most of the time when people say stain, they think transparent stains. The solid and semi-solid stains are often not thought of as stain products because they're not clear. So you have some choices to make there, and you really want to look at what that product is intended for. Do a little research, turn that can around, get online, look at what the manufacturer recommends it for.
Let me ask if as far as if someone's going to try to choose one, which way to go. Look will play a part of it, but what if, say, their reasoning is more, because like you said, the summer sun, it gets hot as all get out here, but they're like, I want to walk barefoot on my deck. And, when it gets 100 and some degrees out there, certain surfaces allow you to do that more than others. Obviously color comes into play there. The certain colors absorb heat a little better than others. What would you recommend if someone's thinking, I want something where it's not going to feel like my deck's on fire when I walk on it every day?
Go towards light colors. Unfortunately, there's not a ton you can do about that.
Okay.
There are a few finishes that try to lower the surface temperature of that deck. If you're really, really concerned about the temperature of that deck, you got a few options. One's to cover it.
Put a roof on it.
Yep, that's the easy one.
We've got the rollout deals if you want to.
Yeah, exactly. There's really some pretty neat products out there for that. The other option that's actually brand new is to think about replacing the deck itself. Take that wood or whatever you have off there, and Moisture Shield, which is a company we deal with. In fact, we were just at their plant in Arkansas a few weeks ago. They make a composite decking product. They're rolling out a new series called the Cool Series. They have actually engineered the surface of this deck to not absorb that heat, which is a unique problem to the west and to the southwest and the southern United States. And they've come up with a solution, which was kind of amazing to me, actually. We were one of the first people to see it. It's becoming available as we speak, but it's an investment. It's not an inexpensive technology, but if really that's a huge concern, and it's a reasonable thing to be concerned about. If you have a deck on the right side of the home and
sun's
you
on
like to spend lots of time on it, and it's going to get hot, especially if you like dark colors, and that's a potential solution. Unfortunately, there's not a great solution from a refinishing standpoint, aside from maybe going to a solid stain in a lighter color, in a tan or something, a light gray.
Make it a little better.
It'll be a little bit better, but unfortunately, nothing. It's impossible to get enough reflectivity in that finish to really keep that heat from settling in and giving you that hot rock experience when you go walk out to barbecue a burger.
Now, for those folks that do have those decks made of the composite materials and things like that, from my understanding, they're designed to be that no maintenance kind of deal. You don't have to do all. Is that the case, or should you do something to some of? I guess it depends on the composite. I guess
it does. So there's a number of things out there. So basically you have two series of composite woods that are on the market now. You have capped products and non-capped products. So a capped product has a core made of a wood plastic composite that is wrapped in another plastic.
Okay.
Generally, it's wrapped in something like a high-density polyethylene. Capped products, there's not really much you need to do in terms of maintenance except clean them. And that's a lot of the newer products are made of that capped material. A lot of the older products, so the first and second generations of composite decks that have been out there for now 25 or more years, are non-capped. So they're wood plastic composite throughout with no additional cap layer. Some of those manufacturers do need more maintenance than others. So Moisture Shield, who I just mentioned, basically doesn't need any maintenance because of the way they've engineered their board. You just have to clean it.
Gotcha.
Pressure wash it once a year, or wash it with a soap and water if you have any surface staining. Some other manufacturers, especially some of the more price point products, the finish on those non-capped boards has been what I would call unreliable. They have a tendency to absorb some things and maybe have not turned out to be quite as low maintenance as they were originally marketed. And so as a result, you do need to think about maintaining those products. Like I said, washing's the first step. Now with non-capped, if you're thinking about pressure washing them, you want to test that. Some of those products, when you pressure wash them, have been known to have a little surface degradation.
Okay.
Because the grain does not quite hold up the way it was intended. Unfortunately, there's some controversy within the composite decking business around those first generation products.
Sure.
Some manufacturers have had lots of issues and others have not. So I would recommend knowing what manufacturer is down, doing a little research to see if that manufacturer recommends pressure washing their product. If you can't find any information, test somewhere before you do, because you don't want to take a pressure washer to your whole deck and have the entire surface come off.
Right. That'd be bad.
Which has been known to happen.
I guess you're going for a whole new look, maybe. That's how to go.
You still are not going to be happy. I would highly not recommend that. So if that is the case, then you want to consider more of a soap and water wash with a brush, something like that, to get that surface dirt and contamination off. And then you want to possibly think about refinishing it. There are a number of products on the market. We don't carry, but we have access to a product called Knotwood. So KNOTWOOD. Knotwood, which is made by a company called Penafin.
Okay.
We carry a number of Penafin products. I'm a big fan of Penafin. They make a very, very good product. And they specifically engineered Knotwood to be applied to exterior wood that is not wood.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of weird how that works out.
Yeah, exactly. They're effective marketing, but not particularly complicated, to say the least. So Knotwood is specifically engineered to be applied to those non-cap decks. If you have a cap deck, there's not a whole lot you can do other than clean it. Because anything you're going to put on it will just sit on the surface and then come right off. So you want to look at how you can use something like a Knotwood to refinish that deck and hopefully extend the life a little bit, because it's going to protect the wood fiber that is part of that wood plastic composite. In addition, a lot of those first generation decks either only came in gray or they came in any color you wanted that faded to gray after 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And so you may have put brown now and now it's gray. So you may want to think about, changing that and getting a different color on there. And we would highly recommend it. We actually have samples of Knotwood in the store, both applied as well as some liquid samples. Penafin makes these handy little tester tubes that I really like, because you can take them home and put them on wood in a few places and figure out what look you really like, as opposed to just looking at a chip sample and hoping it looks like that on your house.
Right.
But if you have one of those first or second generation exterior composite wood decks, seriously think about coming in and taking a look at Knotwood. Honestly, if you can afford it, I'd recommend replacing them with a more current wood composite product, because you'll probably be happier. But if that's not in the budget, Knotwood and proper preparation is a pretty good stopgap method, or just a way to extend the life of that exterior product.
Maybe that's the option if real estate market, if you want to sell that house and you can't afford to build a whole new deck on it, but you're trying to get your curb appeal aspect up a little bit, that's the way to go. So
absolutely. There are also a number of products that are intended to sit on the surface of a deck board. Valspar Deck Correct, which we have access to. Rust-Oleum makes a product called 3X or 10X. These are a heavy-bodied paint that actually is intended to sit on an exterior wood finish or surface like a deck. And those are an interesting solution. I'll be honest with you and tell you, I'm not the biggest fan. They've had some issues with a few of the products, and I think that they maybe have been oversold a bit as to their capabilities.
Right.
But they're good products, properly applied and properly prepared for.
Sure. Now, let me ask this, because what you do with, say, outdoor wood that are vertical surfaces versus horizontal surfaces. Obviously, you've got issues of puddling water and things, possibilities for flat surfaces. So I guess the question would be, do you treat them differently, or do you treat them the same as far as vertical versus flat surfaces?
The preparation is virtually identical between a vertical and a flat surface. You just want to look at the product you're using and see what it's intended for.
Gotcha.
Almost anything that you can use on a horizontal surface or something that's intended for a deck can be used on something like a fence or siding that's a vertical surface, but it doesn't always go the other direction. The bigger factor is not puddling water, it's foot traffic.
Gotcha.
And if the product's not intended to have some abrasion resistance because of the way it's engineered, then you don't want to put it on a deck because it's not going to hold up.
Sure. So it'd be fine for a fence, but not a deck per se.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can generally go the other direction.
So if that's a factor, consider asking about that. So when you say you come by builders here and you ask about a particular product, make sure you tell them this is for a fence, this is for a deck, so they can actually come into play, because a product that may work well on the fence may not be such a good idea for the deck.
Exactly.
So very good. Is there any other areas of this that we wanted to cover that we got sidetracked on, or anything? Do we pretty much?
No, actually, I think we did a pretty good job.
I think so. Pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
Well, pat yourself. You did a
Go,
lot.
Mike.
I just sat
you,
here.
You make me look good. I appreciate that very much. I need all the help I can get.
But if you have any questions about anything related to what we were talking about today, or any project, it doesn't matter if you this weekend you're like, yeah, the weather's nice, but I got some doors I need to hang in the house, or I need we're going to start tiling the bathroom, things like that. Come by Builders Do It Center, talk to the staff. Even if you think you know what's going on, if you're just a do-it-yourself kind of person, even if you say, you know what, I know what I'm doing, talk to someone. Say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Do you recommend me anything additional to what I'm doing right now to ensure that this project turns out right? Your folks will be happy to say, they'll tell you, you got it pretty much nailed. So you know what, you're there close, but you might want to add this product for
tweak this a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they're there for, and take lots of pictures. Bring items in if you can. If you're trying to replace, especially if it gets to plumbing, when you get to like certain joints and things like that you're like, I don't know what it's called, but I need one of these things.
Yeah, we love that.
And,
or at the very least, I needed to do the same thing this one does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The folks will put you in the right direction on any of that stuff. So if you're come by the Builders Do It Center here in Roswell, and folks that are listening in Artesia, they've got Builders Do It Center there on Main Street for you too. So
absolutely,
good deal.
We'd love to see you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Justin, as always, and we'll see you here in a couple weeks.
All right, Mike. Looking forward to it.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, too.